Kia ora, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. And kia ora everyone, ko Megan Takawingwa. I hope that you are very much enjoying the conference so far, and I love the conference theme, Igniting Possibilities. And so the purpose of my chat today is to think about how to ignite possibilities in the context of creating a sustainable funding plan. Quick introduction first up. So my name is Megan Thorn, as I think I've said 3 times now, so I just wanted to be sure you caught that. And I'm from an organisation called Exult. So we are passionate about working towards all community and not-for-profit organisations working at their full potential. And the way that we do that is through providing training and support for community and not-for-profit organisations working at focusing on the business end of your organisation. So all sorts of different workshops and resources focused around really awesome and important things for your organisation, like raising funds through different income streams, raising your profile in the community, so shouting from the rooftops the difference you make in your community, around things like strategic planning, governance, a whole raft of workshops and resources focused on running your organisation. And we do it in lots of different ways. So sometimes I have the fantastic opportunity to be part of conferences like this morning. So thanks very much to Arts Access Aotearoa for that opportunity. We run public workshops, we do in-house workshops, and we create resources. So Tonic Magazine is an example of a resource that we create where we look for things that you would find helpful, or we feel you would find helpful, and we create resources that you would find helpful in the context of running your organisation. So a little bit about me. I've been a workshop facilitator and trainer for around about 20 years. Every time I do that little tally up, I take a little moment. And I'm really passionate about community and community organisations and not-for-profit organisations. And I'm also really passionate about ideas and creativity. And I think it fits really nicely in terms of igniting possibilities and in terms of creating a sustainable funding plan, because sometimes we have to think about what we do in the context of raising funds differently, so that you can connect with those who you're trying to connect to in terms of support. So I'm really fascinated by not so much the how you have ideas as in they happen in your head or the neuroscience behind it, but more about how we have ideas and how we share them with those that we work with. So if we do share, what are the things that contribute to making us feel safe enough to do that? If we don't, what are the things that get in the way? And some really helpful processes to get through from idea to action. And I'll be sharing some ideas with you as we go through the session this morning to help you think about raising funds for your organisation through different income streams in different ways. So acknowledging that we'll have people who are part of the session who are from very large organisations and those from smaller organisations. Some of you are based in large cities, some of you are based in smaller communities, some of you are based in tiny communities. And what I'd love you to take out of this session is, if you have activity in an income stream already, what are some ways that you can possibly leverage that a bit more? And if you're not earning income through a specific income stream that we talk through today, then where are some opportunities for you to do that within your community? Okay, so where I would love to start, actually, and let me remind you too, please add your questions to the chat as we go through the session. And as James mentioned, if you see someone who pops a question into the chat that you would like to also hear the answer to, please do what you need to do so it pops it up the list in the question Q&A tab. We won't have the opportunity to answer all of your questions in the session today, but what I did want to do is create a bit of a document, a Q&A document. So if we don't get to your question during the session, after the session, we'll share with you a Q&A document where we can touch on some of the topics that we haven't been able to cover in the session. And also I wanted to let you know as well, we'll share with you some resources, so handouts that cover the things that I talk about in the session. I would love you to finish this session with a sore hand from taking lots and lots and lots of notes, because that's actually one of the ways that you remember things too, is the making connections and then writing down what ideas for your own organisation. So please do, I welcome you to finish this session with a sore hand from writing. And also be safe in the knowledge that resources will come your way after the session as well. So I've charged into the session and I've missed a very important piece, which is to describe myself. So for those of you describing myself, so I am today wearing, I was thinking about this as James introduced himself too. So today I am wearing one of my favourite tops. It is a dark blue colour with some lovely lighter blue and different shades of blue flowers and beige coloured flowers. So it's one of my favourite tops because it reminds me of a beautiful piece of art that my sister-in-law has on her wall. So it's a top that makes me feel really good. I have very quite short dark brown hair or light brown hair, maybe mousy brown hair. And I have 2 holes in my cheeks, which some people call dimples, but I call lazy cheek muscles. So that's a little bit of a description of me. Okay, so where I'd love to start with our session, creating a sustainable funding plan, working towards a stable table, is with a definition of sustainable funding. I would love you to write this definition down, and even if you Google sustainable funding, you get thousands and thousands of different definitions. I'd love you to write this definition down, and it'll come to you in the handouts that we share as well. So the definition of sustainable funding is to have enough funds for a specific purpose on an ongoing basis. So there's 3 parts to that definition: to have enough funds for a specific purpose on an ongoing basis. And I'm going to talk to each of the 3. So the first part of the definition is to have enough funds. It's impossible to create a sustainable funding plan for your organisation if you're not very, very clear around how much you need, how much money you need. And that's in two streams in terms of how much money you need. So one is, how much money do you need to operate as an organisation of a year? And how much money do you also need to raise? How much funds do you need to raise to enable you to grow, to enable you to achieve the elements of your long-term plan or your strategic plan, or even grow the services and activities and programs that you offer in your community? So the first step is around having enough funds and being really clear around how much do you need. The second part of that definition is for a specific purpose. So to have enough funds for a specific purpose. So I usually ask this question and get a bit of feedback from everyone, but I'm going to imagine that you're putting up your hands where you're sitting. So I'd love to ask the question, how many of you have a budget? And I'm going to imagine that a smattering of you are putting up your hands. And I must admit that I'm sometimes a little bit surprised when I ask this question by the number of people who maybe don't put their hand up so much. So the first step to knowing how much you need is to have a budget. So for those of you who do have a budget, I'm wondering how many of you have a line in your budget specifically for administration costs? And then within your administration costs, I'm wondering how many of you have a line underneath administration costs, which is related to how much funds you need to cover your office expenses for the year. And then underneath office expenses, I'm wondering how many of you have a specific line for stationery. How much funds do you need to raise to cover the stationery that you use in the context of running your organisation? And then underneath that, I wonder how many of you have a line specifically for ballpoint pens. So usually at this point, when I ask this question, there's far less hands going up. I always live in hope that someone will go, yes, I have a line in my budget for ballpoint pens. And it sounds like a very detailed budget, but here's the thinking behind it. And it's related to having enough funds for a specific purpose. So the more specific you can be in terms of how you use your money or how you spend your money, the more that opens up opportunities to cover those funds or raise those funds in different ways. So let me give you a couple of very quick examples. So Exult, we run workshops all over the country, much less, I must say, in the last year or so, and I'm looking forward to getting back into travelling all over the country and meeting lots of people doing awesome things. At every single one of those workshops, we provide a ballpoint pen. And when we were doing exercise around our budget, walking through our budget line by line by line, we realised that there was quite a bit of money that we were spending on providing those ballpoint pens. And so what we did was, because we knew how much, we then started to think about how could we cover those funds in different ways. And we have lots of organisations approaching us, and those organisations are often looking for the opportunity to connect with community and not-for-profit organisations. And we went to a few of them, and we said, we've got this opportunity for you to connect with community and not-for-profit organisations. Do you have branded pens? To which quite a few of those organisations responded, yes, they did. And now we can provide a branded pen for people who take part in our in-person workshops. So branded pens from all sorts of different organisations. So Infoodle is one example. So Infoodle is an organisation that provides customer relationship management software and a event organising platform for community organisations. And now most of the time people walk away from an Exult workshop, in-person workshop, with an Infoodle pen. So it's a small example, but it's an example where we were then able to take that line out of our budget completely. So the more specific you can be in terms of how you spend your funds, the more that offers opportunities to raise those funds in a different way. And I'll actually share a couple of examples, other examples of that as we go through the session. So then the last piece of that definition, on an ongoing basis. So often when I ask the question, what does sustainable funding mean to you? The thing that comes back is the ability or the opportunity or the ability to raise funds in an ongoing nature from an income stream rather than one-off, one-off, one-off. And that is absolutely a very important part of sustainable funding. So as we touch on some different income streams, I'll talk about what are some ways that you can move from one-offs in an income stream to ongoing, to raising funds on an ongoing basis. So I'm just going to repeat that definition one more time. So sustainable funding, when I talk about it, I'm talking about to have enough funds for a specific purpose on an ongoing basis. So one thing that I wanted to touch on too in the context of raising funds, and I'm going to just touch on it very, very briefly, is around how you as an organisation think about funds. Because sometimes the mindset that we have towards money can impact our ability to ask for money. And also can impact our confidence when we are going out into the community to connect in terms of different income streams. So I would love you to really think about how you approach money. And I would love you to take up the challenge of, from this point on, confidently going out into your community, because you know that you provide fantastic activities and services and programs for the people that you support in your community. So I want you to feel confident about going out to your community to look for the funds to help you do that, because you are making a difference. And that simple switch in terms of mindset, you do awesome things. You deserve to have the funds that you need to do those awesome things. And also, there's a bit of work involved in raising the funds to do those awesome things. So I just wanted to ask a question. So thinking about having enough funds and being specific in terms of how you spend your money, we're going to do a bit of whizzy bang technology right now, where we're going to create a word cloud based on how you spend your money, how you use your funds right now. So in front of you, the question will pop up in the tab. And the question is, what do you spend your money on? What are your costs? And I want you to type as many as you can think of into the chat. So things like, I imagine, you might be spending your funds on wages, potentially, or rent, or potentially other utility bills. What do you spend your funds on? I'd love you to type them in right now. And I can see with this whiz-baggy technology that 2 of you are typing right now. So I'd love for more of you to share. So what do you spend your funds on? What are your costs? Lovely. So we've got arts materials and programming. What else? Oh, look at this word cloud developing. So we've got staff costs, you've got materials, lovely. What else do you spend your funds on? Travel, lovely. Travel, yeah. Staff costs, lots of arts materials, awesome. What else? Equipment, lovely. Artist fees, awesome. I'm waiting for someone to write ballpoint pens. What else? What else do you spend your funds on? Awesome. Awesome. So travel is coming up in quite a large kind of fashion. So in creating these word clouds, I don't know if you've used them before, but the more that something is typed in, a word is typed in, the more prominent that becomes within the cloud. So you can see as the word cloud develops that we've got quite a bit of funds spent on travel. Equipment is definitely up there. We've got wages, we've got venue, Kai, awesome. Artist fees, supervision, contractors, lovely. What do you spend your funds on? Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so we could spend the whole of the session asking that question, what do you spend your funds on? And indeed, I would love you to have that question top of mind as you go back after conference to think about what you get out of the session. So I'm going to leave you putting and typing in what you spend your funds on, and I'm going to get you to just focus on my flip chart here for just 1 second. So I wanted to do this in a bit more of a visual way, and you'll need to use your powers of imagination a little bit as I put my visual or my illustration skills into practice. So old school I'd love you to focus on the flip chart, which I'm pretty sure that you can see, thank you very much, on the screen. So I want you to imagine that you've got the word cloud of all your costs up here. So there was equipment, and there was rent, and there was travel. There are a number of different things that you spend your funds on. So I want you to use your powers of imagination and imagine the word cloud is sitting at the top of my flip chart. So now this line here across the middle of my flip chart is a tabletop. So again, you're using your powers of imagination to imagine that this is a tabletop. So metaphorically, using the metaphor of a table, all of your costs are sitting on top of the table, as it were. So now I want you to think about income streams as table legs. So if you think about where does your income come from, which is something that we're going to think about in just a second. And sometimes when I ask this question, where does your income come from? I get grants is one of the prominent income streams I get, and contracts is another. And I know for some of you too that you will be thinking about some funding that you've received recently. What potentially are you going to do to create a sustainable funding plan once that contract income stops coming in? So I want you to think about tabletop. All of your costs are balanced on top. If all of those costs are balanced on just one or two table legs, and for example, you don't get a grant that you've received year after year after year, suddenly something happens and that funder is no longer able to provide you with that grant. Or you have a contract and you've had that contract in place and suddenly things change and you don't have that contract in place, then all of those costs balance on the top of that table, your table suddenly becomes unstable. And you've seen that, one leg tables, two leg tables, they're definitely not the most stable of tables. So the way I want you to think about sustainable funding and creating a sustainable funding plan is to think about the fact that there's 7 different income streams that community and not-for-profit organisations can tap into to raise the funds that you need to operate. So I'm going to draw these up very quickly. And I need to say as I draw, because the faster I draw, the less uniform the table legs become. And I want to use the disclaimer first up that there is no correlation between width of table leg and importance of table leg. And there's no correlation in terms of importance in terms of order that we talk about them from. So the other 5 income streams that sit with grants and contracts as an opportunity to raise funds for your organisation are membership, donations, sponsorship, fundraising activities, which I'm going to write in shorthand, and social enterprise or earned income. Okay, so now you've got a tabletop which has all of your costs sitting on top, which can be supported potentially by up to 7 income streams. And I'm going to give you a definition of each of the income streams in just a second. But I want to do a quick poll first. So, second opportunity to use the awesome whiz bang technology. I would love you to, so first poll, I want you to think about, actually for all of these next questions, I would love you to think about income for your organisation, and I would love you to think about, out of those 7 income streams, where does your income come from? I'm going to ask the question of each of the different income streams. What percentage of your income comes from each income stream? So as you go, we're going to do this as a poll. And so we'll get a clear picture across everyone who's part of the session. You've started already, that's awesome. But I also want you to make a note for yourself. So it's really important to think about where your income comes from. So what percentage of your income comes from contracts? And don't be worried about dollars and cents. I'd just love you to think about percentage of income that comes from contracts. So for some of you, 1 to 10% of your income comes from contracts. For some of you, oh, right, okay, I'm just going to let the poll play out so that I can read the results. And as that happens, I'm just going to give you a definition of contracts. So contract, a third party, usually a government department, contracts your organisation to provide a specific service or program and pays you for doing so. So I've talked through that quickly. The definitions of each of the income streams will come to you after the session. So I'd love you to think about that definition. A third party, usually a government department, contracts your organisation to provide a specific service or program and pays you for doing so. So, okay, so having a look at how this plays out across people who are part of the session. So actually, for most of you, you are not receiving income from contracts. So 1 to 10% of your income, for 56% of you, comes from contracts. So not a huge number, but for some of you, 80 to 90% of your income comes from contract income. So potentially that's a very prominent leg on your table. All right, so now I want you to think about the next income stream. I want you to think about grants. So the question's going to pop up in just a second. Right, what percentage of your income comes from grants? So grants are, the definition, your organisation applies to funding bodies to fund specific projects or costs. So they're not government departments usually, although there's a little bit of a crossover here in that DIA also provides grants. So your organisation applies to funding bodies to fund specific projects or costs. And your organisation is accountable for how you spend the money. You need to show the funder that you've spent it in the way that you said you would. Okay, so this is quite interesting from a poll perspective. For a larger number of you, so it's going up and down and up and down and up and down. So if I add those all up very briefly, because maths is not my strong point, 20, 40, about 60, nearly 60 to 70% of you are raising a large amount of funds from grants for your organisation, which, congratulations, that is indeed the case for a large number of community organisations. We're not going to talk to grants today, but you'll know that the granting landscape has changed massively. So it is very rare these days to receive the full amount of the grant that you're looking to raise. Most often funders these days will want you to show that you are also working to raise some of the funds yourself. And in some instances, funders have changed the criteria. So you may find that a grant that you were receiving, you're not receiving anymore. And at a broad level too, the pool for grants is sometimes getting smaller, and the number of organisations looking for grants is sometimes increasing. So if a large amount of your income that's cut in terms of your table leg is coming from grants, then sometimes you might need to think of some other ways to bring income in, so that if you lose that grant or you only get a portion of what you're looking for, you've got other income streams to cover that funding. So we're not going to cover off grants and contracts in the session today, but what I did want to do is I wanted you to point you towards Match Te Puna Taurite. So you may have heard of Match already. Website is match.org.nz. It's a totally new initiative created by Philanthropy New Zealand, which can connect organisations looking for funds with organisations who are providing funds. So you can sign up. If you're a Tier 4 organisation, you can sign up for free, or your income's under a certain level. You can sign up for free. You can put information about your organisation, and then funders have the opportunity as they sign up to the platform to find you because you fit within the criteria within the organisations they're looking to fund. So that's as much as I wanted to say about grants, but go and check out match.org.nz. Okay, so next question in terms of table legs. So I'd love to focus on membership as an income stream. So for how many of you, or what percentage of your income comes from membership? And membership is where people pay a membership or subscription fee to belong, and in return they receive specific services, benefits, or privileges. Telling the answers to that specific poll. So as part of the session right now, none of you are earning income from membership. Awesome. So we're about to touch. Hang on a second. So one of you is earning a small amount from membership. Awesome. Okay, let's focus on the next table leg. So donations, income stream. I'd love to hear from you. How many of you are raising funds for your organisation to support those costs through membership? Right, actually, so my apologies, everyone. I've just got a bit of a message to say that there's a little bit of a delay in terms of me asking the question and giving you the opportunity to respond. So hopefully you've had the opportunity to respond to membership now. Lovely. And I'd love to focus on donations as an income stream. So what percentage of your income comes from donations? Where people donate time, money, and other resources expecting nothing in return. So donations can be both small or large. Awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to give you a second to respond. So what percentage of your income do you estimate comes from donations? Lovely. Okay, so for some of you, there's a small percentage coming from donations, so 1 to 10% of your income, 11 to 20%ish of your income. Lovely, very good, very good. It's really interesting. So we're going to talk about donations in just a second as well. And now I'd like to focus on sponsorship. So what percentage of your income comes from sponsorship? Awesome. Okay, and here's a quick definition of sponsorship, and we're going to talk about this in just a second. So sponsorship, businesses contribute time, money, or other resources, and there's an expectation to receive something in return. So for some of you, you're sitting at around about, again, so 1 to 10% or 20 to 30% of your income is coming from, or that 1 to 30% is coming from sponsorship. Awesome. Okay, 2 more questions. You'll notice a pattern. Right, I'd love to focus on fundraising activities. So what percentage of your income currently comes from fundraising activities? Awesome, thank you. Definition of fundraising activities. So I really think there's an opportunity with fundraising activities. We're going to talk about this in just a second, but they're activities that are organised for the sole purpose of raising extra funds. So they rely usually on member or client involvement to help make them happen. And they do not in any way, shape or form have to relate to the services that you offer. So that's where I think the opportunity is. in that you can do anything as a fundraising activity. It doesn't have to relate to your organisation and the services and activities you provide. Lovely. So once again, interesting. So some of you who are part of the workshop, a large proportion of your income is coming from fundraising activities. Awesome. And for others of you, you're at the other end of the scale. So 1 to 20% is coming from fundraising activities. And last income stream, social enterprise. I'd love you to let me know. So what percentage of your income comes from social enterprise? So social enterprise or entrepreneurial activities or earned income is where your organisation trades using a traditional business model, so trades products or services, and activities are not necessarily the core of what you do, but they definitely add value to your existing why. Okay, so some of you, it's interesting too. So at different ends of the spectrum. So for a portion of you, a third of you, in fact, no, changing that just because I said. So for some of you, you're generating a huge percentage of your income from earned activities. And for some of you, it's the lesser end of the scale. And for some of you, you're in the mid. So that's really interesting. We'll talk about social enterprise and that opportunity to earn income from that income stream. So thank you for answering the questions and for sharing that via the poll. And now I hope you also, as you were taking notes, in front of you, and in fact, I'll share a template as part of the notes we share to follow up the session, you'll have a clearer idea of where your money is coming from at the moment. And ideally, in terms of creating a sustainable funding plan, you're looking to generate a good level of income across 3 or 4 or 5 different income streams. So not all 7, because you would probably fall over from trying to do too much. But the idea is if you've got a good level of income, so we're talking, around about, depending on how many income streams you're operating in, a good level of income from 3, 4, 5 different income streams. Then if you you don't get the grant that you're looking for, or something massive changes with your contract, or earned income, so one of your earned income streams goes away for whatever reason, you've got income coming from the other income streams that you've got a good level of income coming in from, which keeps your table stable while you look for another income stream, so that your organisation can keep operating while you're looking for another income stream. So you're working towards a stable table in terms of those income streams that you're tapping into. So the first part of the session, I really wanted to step back for a moment, and rather than diving directly into income streams, wanted to have the opportunity to sort of think about the back end of raising funds for your organisation. And there's a couple of top tips to take out. So one is to know how much money you need. How much money do you need to operate on a yearly basis, and how much money do you need to grow your programs, to achieve what you want to achieve that you've set out in your long-term or your strategic plan. So that's the first step. And the second step is to have a budget. So have a really detailed budget so that you know and you're really clear about what you need to raise over the course of the year and how that money is going to be spent over the course of the year. And then track that budget. So at the end of each month, you're looking at how are things looking. So in terms of how I thought things would be going out and how we hoped things would be coming in, what does the picture look like? So that you can adjust as you go. So in months where you've brought in more income than you anticipated, you might be able to change your plan in terms of down the track and what you'd like to raise from a different income stream. And so in terms of that budget too, and your sustainable funding plan, how much you need to operate plus how much you need to achieve to grow your organisation, to grow your programs and activities, or achieve your long-term or strategic plan, sits at the top of your sustainable funding plan. That's the goal that you're looking to raise. And then underneath that, I always think it's a great idea to start your sustainable funding plan to think about how you're going to earn that income across a number of different income streams. So how are you going to achieve that total amount across earning income from memberships, donations, sponsorship, etc., or the combination of 3, 4, or 5 different income streams? And I often think setting the intention or setting the goal for an income stream is where you start, because once you set the intention, then often your focus and activity works towards achieving that goal. But also setting the goal will give you a real good indication of what level of activity you'll need to have under each income stream in order to help you to get to that total amount. For example, if you're looking to raise, let's say you're looking to raise $50,000 across a year via donations, I've just plucked that number out of the air, then and at the moment you're raising around about 1,000, then you know that you're going to have to do some focused activity around donations and building up your donations income stream in order to help you to get to that goal. So total amount, contribution from each income stream, and then what initiatives are you running under each income streams to work towards raising that competition is a very broad overview of your sustainable funding plan. Okay, so what I'd love to do for the rest of the session is delve into each of the income streams. And as I mentioned, we're not going to have the opportunity to delve into grants and contracts in the session right now. And actually, I usually run this workshop as a one-day workshop. And I stand at the start of the session and say, each of these income streams can be a one-day workshop in themselves. And so sometimes it can feel a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, sharing all of the ideas and thoughts for each income stream. And we won't have the opportunity to share as much today, but my goal for delving into each income stream is, I mentioned it already, is if you don't have activity in one of those income streams at the moment, then you're looking for opportunities. I'd love to ignite possibilities in terms of starting to earn income from that income stream. So we'll share a couple of ideas to help you to do that, but also sometimes we have quite fixed ideas about what each income stream is and how it works. We might even have fixed ideas about whether it's an opportunity for us as an organisation. And I'd love you to park those ideas for now. And I'd love you to approach each income stream with an open mind. So what if we could earn income from this income stream? What might it look like? And some of the ideas that I share, it might not work specifically for your organisation, but how might you modify it slightly for your organisation and your community, and then it might provide an opportunity. Okay, so we're going to focus on membership up front. So first up, membership. And some of you identified that you are, a few of you are raising income from membership already. Let me share with you first the definition of membership. So the definition of membership is to belong or to have a sense of belonging. And quite often what happens is you might be tapping into membership as an income stream, but often it looks like people who support you, who will become your members, pay a nominal membership fee in order to access your services. And I want to flip that on its head to talk about membership in the context of sustainable funding. So when I'm talking membership for sustainable funding, it's not in any way, shape or form related to those for whom you provide services right now. Where I feel the opportunity is with membership is in looking into your community and looking for opportunities where you can fill a need in terms of wanting to belong or having that sense of belonging for a target group within your community. And so it's not about membership for those that you support already. It's about looking at your community and creating a membership package of benefits and things that add value for those that you want to sign up as members, which encourages them to sign up. And they are people that you are not supporting right now. So it's an income stream. And the best way to give you an example of this is to provide an example. And it's not an arts example, but I use this example all the time because it is often quite counter to the way that we think about membership. So this example of membership is from a branch of the Women's Refuge. So it's a branch of the Women's Refuge that's operating in a very small community, and they wanted to think about how membership might be a potential income stream for them. Unequivocally, what they are absolutely not talking about is charging those that they support as a branch of Women's Refuge to access their support. That is not at all what they were interested in focusing on. In fact, that's very, very as far from what they wanted to do as you can possibly get. But they did feel that there was an opportunity for them in terms of raising funds through membership. And they talked about what would they put together. So they looked at their community, smaller community. They realised there wasn't really anything around that really helped connect women aged between 25 and 45. So that was the target, women in the community aged between 25 and 45. And so they thought about what would we put together as a package that would encourage people to join our membership offering and give them that sense of getting benefits from joining and getting that sense of belonging whilst helping us to raise funds. And they created the idea of of a membership offering called the Inspirational Women's Club. Okay, so how it worked was the first step, they approached businesses in their community who had the same target market. So women aged 25 to 45. They said, this is us, this is the difference that we make in our community, and we're looking to raise funds through creating a membership scheme, which we've called Inspirational Women. And we'd like, when people sign up to become an inspirational woman, we want them to be able to come to your store and shop and receive a discount because they're part of our membership offering. And most of the stores that they approached absolutely signed up because they didn't really have to do much. All they had to do was provide a 10% discount when someone came into the store to shop. But actually, there was a lot of benefit from them because they were getting their target market into the store through being part of Inspirational Woman. So that was the first part of the program of benefits. The other things that they did, they included, they had events. So they had 6 monthly events where the people who were part of the Inspirational Woman group already could buy a ticket and they had to pay $10 for that ticket, but that helped cover the cost of creating the event. And then they could also invite a friend to come along. So it was a buy one, get one free kind of offer. So they could bring a friend who wasn't already an Inspirational Woman to come along and be part of the evening. And it was a very smart move because then that meant they had their Inspirational Woman coming along anyway, and they were bringing someone who wasn't yet signed up as a member of the Inspirational Woman. But hopefully by the end of the night, they might have been. They also did other things. So you could walk around town holding your drink bottle, which had Inspirational Woman up, wearing your t-shirt, which was branded, and driving a car with a bumper sticker that said Inspirational Woman. So it got lots of discussions happening in the community around what is this and how do we get involved? And they also created a newsletter. So not one of those newsletters that comes into your inbox and you think, I could read that, but I'll never get that couple of minutes of my life back. It was very much focused on what did their Inspirational Woman want to read about. So they had all sorts of different things included as part of the newsletter. And they could tell from the statistics behind sending it out that lots of people were connecting with that newsletter and opening it up and finding it really helpful. So those are some of the things that they included as part of the membership offering, Inspirational Woman. And they found 3 things. One thing they found was that it turned people who had Women's Refuge as a heart organisation, it turned them from being ad hoc donors into ongoing contributors, because each year they paid their membership fee to be part of Inspirational Woman. The second thing that they noticed was that there were people who, they had, that really appreciated the difference that Women's Refuge made in the community, but hadn't taken the step from connecting and understanding and buying into the why to actually making or supporting in a financial sense. So it also converted those people into regular contributors because they as well were signing up for their membership each year. And the third thing that they noticed was that there were a whole group of women aged 25 to 45 in the community who signed up to be part of the Inspirational Woman, who hadn't contributed to Women's Refuge in any way, shape or form, and possibly wouldn't because it wasn't an organisation that they had a heart connect with. But they loved the idea of Inspirational Woman and all of the things and the values and the benefits that were attached to that. So they then became regular givers as well, or regular contributors in a financial sense as well, in terms of paying their fee, their membership fee each year. So there were 3 things that branch of the Women's Refuge found that they didn't expect in terms of tapping into membership as an income stream. So there's a few things attached to tapping into membership as an income stream. It takes a bit of work. Then all things raising funds for your organisation takes some work to get them up and running. But it is definitely an income stream that once it's up and running, as long as you keep connected with your members, it can be a consistent source of income. And once you've covered the cost to set it up, Then your sources of income past operating each year are income, untagged income for your organisation. It's also an awesome income stream, an awesome opportunity to do with other organisations in your community. So one of the things that can help you to tap into, especially as a small organisation and a small community, that can help you to tap into an income stream like membership, is doing it with other organisations. So it's not related to what you do as an organisation, but it is something that you can deliver and earn income from alongside other organisations in your community. And it's a really nice way to spread the load in terms of getting things done. So that's as much as I wanted to share about membership. But the key things that I'd love you to take away from it are, it's an opportunity to do something in your community where you create that sense of belonging or enable people to feel like they belong. It's not related to the people that you provide services for already. You need to find a target group in your community who is looking for that sense of creating, a sense of connecting, or that sense of belonging. So the Women's Refuge example is women aged 25 to 45. It could be families in your community. It could be businesses in your community that are looking for the opportunity to connect. It could be older persons. There's a whole raft of different opportunities in terms of that target market. And once you're clear on your target market, you can think about what are the elements of my membership offering that I would put together because they would provide benefits and value and be attractive for my target who I'm looking to get to sign up. And in terms of that ongoingness, it's one of the income streams that's the easiest to tap into ongoing or sustainable, because each year you're checking in with your members to see what they love, what they don't love so much, what would they like to see, and you're providing that. So that they tick over and pay their membership fee each year in an ongoing nature. Awesome. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover in terms of membership. Next income stream that I'd love to dive into is donations. So the definition of a donation is a gift given with no strings attached. Donations can be big or small. And I'm going to talk about the difference between definition and donations and sponsorship in just a second. But quite often I get the question of, we want to bypass all those small donations, which are a little bit annoying. We want to get straight to the big donations. That's where the opportunity is at. And so let me share with you a very important point around donations. And that is, often people will make a donation, a smaller donation to start, to test out your organisation. So how do they treat me when I make a small donation? How does your the organisation operate? And once they build trust with your organisation based on that small donation and based on your saying thank you for that small donation, because the thank you is your most potent tool to get from small one-off donation to next donation and next donation after that. Once they test the waters, then that increases the chances of them giving you a larger donation down the track. So it's very rare to meet someone for the first time, ask for a massive donation and receive it. You need to do some work building relationships and making sure that you thank donors for whatever amount that they give your organisation. Two things to keep in mind in terms of donation. So one is, two key points. One is to take and make as many opportunities as you can to make the ask. So we do a lot of research with all sorts of different organisations, and this is actually some research that we did with small businesses. So we asked those small businesses, what is it that makes you, or that encourages you to give when a community organisation approaches you and asks for a donation? And the number one thing that encourages them to give is being asked. Yeah. So without a doubt, if you don't ask, you won't get. If you do ask, the worst thing that can happen is you get a no. So take and make as many opportunities as you can to make the ask. And there's hundreds of different ways that you can do that. So often when I ask the question, what are all the ways that you can give people the opportunity to give, because that's what you're doing. You're giving people the opportunity to give to your organisation to help you do what you do. So take and make as many opportunities as you possibly can. And I'm going to talk about a couple in just a second. But often face-to-face is thought of as the main way, but there's lots of different ways that you can tap into donations. So something simple like a donations box in different organisations in your community. So do you have an art supply store in your community where you might visit them and say, this is us, this is a difference that we make, and we would love the opportunity to put a donations box on your counter. It's lots of small donations, but often the small donations are what add up to make a larger donation. And it, at the very least, is raising your profile in your community so that people start to know that you exist, and then potentially, look out for you and try and find out more about your organisation. So first point is to take and make as many opportunities to make the ask as you can. The second really important tip around donations is respectfully telling your story. I don't know if any of you have heard of the story of Joe Millionaire. So this is a handed down through the generations kind of story. It's a story of Joe Millionaire. I'm not sure that was the name that he was given when he was born, but it's the name that he's assumed for this story. He decided that he'd like to be a millionaire. And he knew that given where he was based, so he was based in a very, very small community, a small rural community, and given the skills that he had at that point in time in his life, if he stayed where he was doing what he was doing, it was unlikely that he would become a millionaire. So what he decided to do was pack up everything, and he decided that he would travel New Zealand, and he would share his story, and he would ask 1 million people for $1, and that is how he would achieve his goal of becoming a millionaire. And I reckon this is one of the very first examples of crowdfunding before the internet made it much easier than packing up everything you own and doing a nationwide trip. So he would approach people and he would say, hi, my name's Joe Millionaire. I'm not collecting for charity or a good cause. I'm collecting for myself. I've set the goal of becoming a millionaire, and in order to help me achieve that goal, I'm traveling the country and I'm asking 1 million people to donate $1. Do you have $1 that you can donate? So respectfully telling your story. And what you're doing when you're respectfully telling your story is you're sharing your why and your what, and you're making the ask. And we know about the story of Joe Millionaire because he approached a fabulous colleague of mine at the Mount Beach. And he shared that story. Hi, my name's Joe Millionaire. I'm not collecting for charity or a good cause. I'm collecting for myself. I've set myself the goal of becoming a millionaire. And in order to help me to achieve that goal, I'm traveling the country and I'm asking 1 million people to donate $1. Do you have $1 that you can donate? And given what we do, my colleague was intrigued by what he was doing. So she asked lots and lots of questions. She actually had $5 in her pocket, which she said is not something she often does. These days, Joe Millionaire might have travelled with tap and go as a way of making it easy for people to make donations. But she gave him that $5 and she asked him lots of questions. So where have you been? Have you found that different regions have been more giving? Have you changed the way you shared your story? Has that changed the reaction that you've got from people? And the all-important question to end with, which was how much have you raised so far? So there's no way to corroborate Joe Millionaire's estimation at that point in time as to how much he'd raised, but he said he'd raised around about $35,000. So it's lots of littles building to make a larger donation. But the most important thing I'd love you to take away from that story is respectfully telling your story. And there's two tools that you can use to help you respectfully tell your story. And they're two tools that are not often used, but I think they're one of the most powerful, or two of the most powerful in your arsenal. And they are your vision and your mission. I would love it if you would check in with your vision and mission. I've got some really clear ideas around what is a vision and what is a mission and how they can fit together to help you respectfully tell your story. So I want you to check your vision. Does your vision articulate why you exist? And does your mission articulate what you do? So your vision's all about your why. Why do you exist? What's your purpose? What is the difference that you want to make for those in your community that you support? Not for your whole community or the whole world at large, for those that you support. Your mission is what you do. Specifically, what do you do to work towards that vision? I'm going to give you a couple of really quick examples. So at the start of the session, I shared, I introduced myself, and I used to introduce myself by saying, hi, I'm Megan from Exult. We provide training and support for community and not-for-profit organisations at the business end of what you do. And it's kind of like, meh, so what? There's no connection there. It's what we do. Now I'm much better at sharing. I'm Megan from Exult, and we are really passionate about working towards all community and not-for-profit organisations working at their full potential. And the way that we do that is through providing training and support for community and not-for-profit organisations at the business end of running your organisation. So that's our vision and our mission put together that I share every time I meet someone for the first time, or at the start of every workshop, in fact. So a great way of respectfully sharing your story or telling your story is to share your vision up front, which articulates why you exist and the difference that you make for those you support, and then sharing what behind it, which is literally what you do in order to do that. So I'm going to share a question with you. So the first thing I'd love you to do is check in with your vision and mission. Does your vision articulate why you exist as an organisation and the difference that you're looking to make for the community you support? Does your mission articulate what you do? And when you put them together, is that now a really nice way that you can respectfully tell your story? And I'm talking about it in the context of asking for donations, but actually I talk about this in the context of everything that you do in terms of raising your profile, in terms of governance, in terms of every different income stream, in terms of connecting with volunteers, all of those things. If you can share your strong vision that articulates why you exist and your mission that articulates what you do, it increases your chances of an emotional connection. So in the context of donations, that's what you're looking for, respectfully telling your story in order to get that emotional connection. And in the notes, I'll share a link to a talk by a guy called Simon Sinek. And he has a TED talk, which is called Start With Why. And what often happens is someone will say to us, what do you do in terms of your organisation? And we'll answer that with our mission, literally what we do. And then it misses an opportunity to get that emotional connection. So the language that you use when you describe why you exist is what connects with the emotion and decision-making part of your brain. When you share what you do, the language that you use connects with the part of your brain that's responsible for information and data processing. So we need to get really great at starting with why, because people don't buy what you do, they buy why you exist. And when I say buy, I mean connect. People don't connect at an emotional level with what you do. It'll increase the chances of connecting at an emotional level when you get really great at talking about why you do that. So here's a question that you can use to help you craft why you exist, if that's not how your mission is, your vision is crafted right now. So I'm going to talk to it quickly and it'll come to you in the notes. So if you don't get the chance to write it down, you'll have it in front of you in the notes. So the question is, if your organization was doing everything 100% right, what would your community look like as a result? If your organization was doing everything 100% right, what would your community look like as a result? And I wanted to give you two very, very quick examples. So one is of a community centre. And this is a story from a while back where this community centre was receiving ACE funding. So funding coming out the wing wang, I'm not sure is a technical term. They had lots of funding. They had enough funding to do what they needed to do, so much so that funding was not an issue for them. Almost overnight, there was a change with how ACE funding worked, and they no longer had the funding that they did have. And they'd actually got to the point where they were almost on the brink of closing their doors because they hadn't created this stable table. So when they lost the ACE funding, they lost funding for their organisation and had nothing to support the costs. So a colleague of mine was a very good friend of the lady who ran the community centre, and she rang up and she's like, I have exhausted all possibilities in terms of funding for our community centre. I've gone to the community, I've asked for donations, I've done lots of stuff, and I just don't understand. We can't, we're struggling to raise the funds that we had to keep the doors open. And so my lovely colleague, who very respectfully asked this question and could do so because they were good friends, she said, there's another community centre, in a town that's also very close to you. Would it be so bad if you had to close your doors? Because wouldn't people just go to their other community centre and they'd still have programs and activities? And her very good friend stopped for a second, a little bit flummoxed. That's not the response I was expecting. She's like, no, you don't understand. If we closed our doors, then we do all these programs and people wouldn't be able to come to the program. We do this program doing this and this activity and this for this group. And if we closed our doors, people wouldn't have access to all of those programs, which are really important. And my colleague said, yes, I understand that's what you do. So all the programs and activities, that's what you do. But actually, people could do that other places, couldn't they? So, what would be the impact of you closing your doors? And her friend waited for a second again. She's like, oh, she's starting to get a little bit, frustrated. She's like, no, you don't understand. If we closed our doors, we wouldn't be able to do this program or this program or this program, or, there's this activity and that group of people wouldn't be able to come into the centre. And just to understand what you do, my colleague, this is, but, if you had to close the doors, what would be the bad thing about that? And she's got to the point after a couple of back and forths where she was quite frustrated by this point, as you can imagine. She said, you don't understand, if we shut our doors, there would be a lot of lonely people in our community. And that was their why. So she'd been talking to her what, but she hadn't been able to articulate their why, and their why wasn't articulated as part of their vision. So their vision was to create a community where no one had to feel lonely. And once she got to that point and she was really clear around why they existed, she could then go out to her community and connect with people and really share the difference that they were making in the community. And another example I wanted to share very, very quickly is that of a budgeting organisation. So this budgeting organisation, we sent them this question, if your organisation was doing everything 100% right, what would your community look like as a result? We sent them that question before helping them work on their vision. And the manager of the budgeting organisation rang up a week before the workshop, very, very excited. And she was like, we loved that question. Gosh, it helped us to think about our why. And we've created a draft and we wanted to share it with you before the session to make sure we're on the right track. And at that point, the draft of their vision, why they existed, and I've got to read it here because it's quite long, was to create a community where people were empowered to make sound financial decisions and could live a life of abundance and prosperity. So it's quite long, that wee definition or that wee crafting of their vision, and it's got lots of big jargony words. So empowered, abundance, prosperity. Quite often with a vision, the power of the vision is in its simplicity. So using really simple language and no jargon. And we said, awesome start. And at the end of the session, which happened a week later, their vision is to create a community where nobody has to wake up and worry about money. Yep. So miles away from abundance, prosperity, empowered, blah, 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 to create a community where no one has to wake up and worry about money. It enables you to create almost a visual in your mind, paint a picture of the difference that they're trying to make, that organisation is trying to make in their community. So it's really important in the context of taking and making as many opportunities to make the ask as possible, having a well-crafted and strong vision that is using very simple language with no jargon, and a mission that frames up what you do makes it way easier for everybody in your organisation to share your vision and mission, and to take and make the opportunity to make the ask in the context of donations while respectfully sharing your story. So I'd love you to, next steps in terms of vision and mission, check in with your vision. Does it articulate why you exist? Check in with your mission. Does it articulate what you do? And how do you use them together to do that very first introduction or elevator pitch, if you like? And always, always start with why. So lead with why. Even when someone asks you, what do you do? Flip the question on its head and start with your why. Are we really passionate about all community and not-for-profit organisations working at their full potential? And the way that we do that is through providing training and support. So flip it around and start with why. Lovely. And I wanted to talk about one example for donations as well, which relates to that opportunity to take and make as many opportunities as you can to make the ask. And that is through digital platforms. So I'm sure that some of you will know about Boosted, boosted.org.nz, the arts fundraising platform, crowdfunding platform, but also Give a Little. So those are two examples of platforms that enable you to make the ask in a as wider sense as you possibly can. So with technology platforms like that, you're now not constrained to just making the ask within the community, but every one of your supporters and stakeholders can potentially push that ask out as far and wide as you possibly can via technology. So it increases your chances of being able to make the ask and raise lots of small amounts towards a larger amount. And a great example of that right now on Boosted platform is with the Blue Goose Paper Mill and Charitable Trust, or the Paper Mill. So they've got a crowdfunding initiative running on Boosted right now, where they're looking to raise $7,500 to purchase and create bespoke molds and decals to help them make their paper. So I won't even stand here and pretend I know what decals are. I'm pretty clear on what molds are. But what I love about this initiative is they've been really clear about how much do they need. And possibly they might need a little bit more than the 7,500 that they're looking through to raise through Boosted. But Boosted is an awesome opportunity maybe to help them raise a good chunk of what they're looking to raise. So they're really specific around $7,500 is what they're looking to raise. But through Boosted and their online platform, they can share their vision and mission and talk about what they're trying to do. They can share their story. They can share videos of their programs in action and really connect people with those that they support and show the difference that they make, obviously in a way where everyone has given their permission. And they can then send a link to raise through that platform out as far and wide as they possibly can. And it takes giving online. And online giving is one of the forms of giving that is growing. So if you don't have the opportunity to take donations online, that is something that I'd love you to explore on leaving this workshop. So Give a Little is a way that you can do that. They do take an administration fee, as does Boosted, but I always think that, 10% in the case of Boosted of, 90% of funds raised, because you could do that through an online platform, is far more helpful than 0% of funds raised, because you can't do that through an online platform. So Boosted is one example. There's another example that I wanted to share too, which is Raisley.com, Raisley. It's also an online platform that enables you to run fundraising initiatives online, and you can use the Raisley platform for free. And it has a lot of the functionality where you can set up your own web page through Raisley. You can take donations online. You can do a whole lot of different things at an online level to help you tap into donations as an income stream. In terms of moving from donations as a one-off to ongoing, the best tool that you have in your arsenal is firstly to say thank you. So there's all sorts of statistics around the importance of thanking people when they make a donation for the first time. So when you say thank you to someone when they make their first donation, no matter how big or small it is, it increases their chances of giving a second time by 48%. When you say thank you after that second donation in a nice timely manner, so timely is important, within 24 hours, it increases your chances of getting a third donation by something like 68%. So saying thank you is vitally important. And there's also interesting statistics around people who don't give for a second time. So only 19% of donors give for a second time, because as community organisations, we're not usually so great at saying thank you. So we put all the work into getting the first donation, and then we lose the opportunity to make it ongoing because we don't follow up with a thank you. So the importance of the thank you, I almost can't stress it enough. Lovely. Okay, so that is donations. All right, the third income stream that I wanted to focus on is sponsorship. The definition of sponsorship is to assume responsibility for. And often donation and sponsorship is used interchangeably by both the organisations that we're talking to, or the people that we're talking to, and by us as organisations looking to raise funds. So donations are very, very different. Here's my donation. Sponsorship is about assuming a level of responsibility for. So let me give you one example. So one example is, when someone goes through an AA program, they are paired with a sponsor. So that sponsor assumes a certain level of responsibility for the success of that person in their journey to sobriety. And at the same time, though, that person assumes a level of responsibility for the success in their journey. So they both assume responsibility for the success of the other. It's a partnership, which is the same for sponsorship. So sponsorship is a partnership between yourself and 99.999% of the time a business, in which you are assuming a certain level of responsibility for the success of that business. And at the same time, that business is assuming a certain level of success for the responsibility for the success of your initiative, your program, your activity, or your organization, depending on what you're talking about in the context of sponsorship. So the difference between donations and sponsorship is based around intent. Donation, the intent is a gift given with no strings attached. I love what you do. I'd like to help you make it happen. With sponsorship, the business always has an intention to get something out of that partnership. And so sponsorship is not a philanthropic decision. Sponsorship is a decision but made by a business to spend a portion of their marketing budget on sponsorship. And in just the same way as they would expect a return on spending that marketing budget in different ways. So, putting an ad on the TV, let's say, on the radio, let's say, plastering the back of a bus, driving around your community with their ad. In the same way that they're looking for a return on that spend, that marketing spend, they're also looking for a return on spend in sponsorship. And I think that that is an opportunity for community and not-for-profit organisations. So what sometimes happens with sponsorship is we look around our community and we think, oh, that's a big business that's making, must be making quite a good profit. I bet they've got a bit of money to put towards sponsorship. And it's not always the best way to approach to increase your chances of success. The best way, or the one step in terms of increasing your chances of success with sponsorship, is to be really clear around who you can put potential sponsors in touch with. Because what a sponsor is looking for when they enter into a sponsorship partnership is they're usually looking for exposure, or they're usually looking for a way to increase their bottom line. And one way that they can do that is through getting exposure to the people who are most likely to buy their products or services. So they're not looking for exposure to the world at large, they're looking for exposure to the people who are most likely to buy their products or services. And so the first step for you as an organisation thinking about sponsorship is to be really clear around who you can put potential sponsors in touch with. And let me once again give you an example to bring it to life a little bit more. So we did some work with an organisation that supports families with children with autism. And they were looking at sponsorship as a way of raising funds for their organisation. And so we said, well, who can you put potential sponsors in touch with? So who? And they were like, well, that's really easy, actually. We could connect, people with, we could connect with anyone really that is, has experienced, either has a child with autism that they're supporting, or as part of wider family, or as a school friend, or, anyone really who has had experience of supporting someone in a family with autism, we could connect a sponsor with. And we like, that might be the case, but that's a very wide group of people. So we went through a process, and there's 2 steps through the process. The first is to ask that question, who can you put potential sponsors in touch with? And in doing that process, sit with that question and post-it notes and marker pens and create a list, all of the who's that you can possibly think of. So there will be those that you support. There will also be people who are helping you to provide your programs or services. You may have volunteers who are part of that. There'll be your trustees. There'll be people that you deal with, or organisations that you deal with on a day-to-day basis in your community. Think about the whole list of who's. Who is in your sphere of influence? And then take each of those who's one at a time and look for commonalities and similarities between them. Where are the connections? Because you're looking to be able to frame up a target market. So this organisation, target market for then whom you can look at businesses who want to be connected with them as well. So in doing this process, that organisation that supported families with children with autism, they were really clear about who they connected with as part of their organisation. So they knew that for their organisation specifically, they mostly supported boys, and it just happened to be who they supported as an organisation. They knew a lot about the kids that they supported. So most of those boys were aged 8 to 14. And they also knew that a lot of the boys that they supported, age 8 to 14, loved dinosaurs. So now they have a target group. So they could go out to the community and say, we can connect you with this number of boys aged 8 to 14 who love dinosaurs. Now, when I say that, unequivocally, I do not mean you could provide contact details. So the value that you bring to a sponsorship partnership is where you become the conduit between the business who is looking to enter a sponsorship partnership and the target market that you can connect them with. So you completely control how they connect, but you are the conduit who is in the middle. So once they thought about that specific target market, boys age 8 to 14 who love dinosaurs, they thought about the businesses in their community. And there was an educational toy store that had opened up just recently. And they approached the educational toy store and said, this is us, this is the difference we make in the community. And we are looking to we are looking to connect with businesses in terms of sponsorship opportunities. And the manager of the educational toy store absolutely saw the connect. So it changes the nature of your approach from cap in hand, can you please business give us some money, to actually business your approach. And from an opportunity point of view for a business, it's a connection with a quality number of their target market versus the scattergun approach, which is an ad on the radio or on TV or in the paper, which will indeed connect with thousands more people potentially, but only a fraction of that number of people will be actually their target market. So that's the opportunity with sponsorship. And in terms of turning that into something ongoing, it's all about relationships, relationships, relationships. So once you start a relationship with a sponsor, then the way that you manage that relationship, make sure that you keep connecting and make sure you share the difference that is made through their sponsorship. And also talk about how your partnership can evolve as time goes on. That increases your chances of going from one-off sponsorship to ongoing relationship. Lovely. All right, last two income streams I'm going to cover very, very quickly. First one is fundraising activities. And often when I start talking about fundraising activities, I get a bit of roll of the eyes. And that's often because when we think about fundraising activities, sometimes we're thinking about the old classics like a sausage sizzle. Whereas I think the opportunity with fundraising activities comes from the ability and opportunity to do anything that you want. So top tip in terms of fundraising activities is to look at your community and look for sections or groups in your community that are completely undercatered for in terms of the opportunity to do some fun stuff. So in the same way as we talked about membership, if you looked at your community and thought, there's a gap for women aged 25 to 45, let's use the same target market, to get together and have a bit of fun, then that's a potential focus, a target for a fundraising activity. And then the next opportunity is around how you can do things that are really different. So it's not the sausage sizzle. It's a day at the races using moon hoppers as the horses. So they're fundraising activities, they're activities that don't often happen in your community. And they're the things that will get people interested and to take notice of the activity that you're creating and increase the chances of them coming along. So the first step is to think about who is the target in your community and then create a really exciting, different fundraising activity that will appeal to that target market. Fundraising activities also take a bit of work to make them happen, and often there is the opportunity from fundraising activities comes from your ability to scale things up. So it's not, 50 sausages sold at the sausage sizzle, it's 500 tickets sold for a fantastic community event aimed at a specific target market. And often that is something that you can do through collaborating with other organisations. So look for opportunities where you can scale up and potentially collaborate with other organisations in your community. And they don't have to be creative spaces to help you do that scaling up. And last income stream before we get to questions. So Amy has let me know that there's lots of questions coming through and we may not have the opportunity to talk to all of them. But like I said, put them in the Q&A tab and we'll create a Q&A section to go with the notes that come from the session. But the last income stream I wanted to tap into, touch on is social enterprise or earned income. So that's where you're trading using a business model to earn income for your organisation to help you do what you do. And most of you, in fact, when we did the poll, there were a few of you who are earning nicely in terms of earned income or social enterprise for your organisations. And some of you will hire your venues. Some of you will hold exhibitions or sell art as a way of potentially raising funds for your organisation. There's all sorts of different ways that you can earn income, sometimes related to your vision and your mission, sometimes not related to your vision and your mission. So one example that I wanted to give really quickly is of a brand of wine called 27 Seconds. So 27 Seconds is a company that has been set up by two people who were very aware of the impact of the slave trade globally. So every 27 seconds, a child or an adult is kidnapped and taken into slavery. So 27 Seconds is a winemaker who has created this label and brand called 27 Seconds, and they sell their wine, and all of the profit made from selling their wine is shared with an organisation called Hagar International, who focuses on decreasing the slave trade and helping people get out of slavery in countries like Vietnam and Laos. And through the sales of their wine, they've contributed $145,000 so far to Hagar International to help them do what they do. But it's an example of earned income. So it's an example that I shared too, because one of the opportunities in terms of earned income is what skills or knowledge do you have in a specific area? And how can you tap into that skills or knowledge to potentially raise funds for your organisation? The second opportunity in terms of social enterprise is what specialist equipment or resources do you own that potentially are not being used all the time and that you can potentially hire out at a market rate and earn income for your organisation through providing that equipment or those resources. So those are two potential options for earned income. And I'll pop heaps of examples. There's so many examples of organisations who have really strong income streams through earned income. I'll pop heaps of examples in the notes. Awesome. So we've got 5 more minutes before you snap back to the main session. I'd love to check in terms of questions. So Amy's going to help me out here in terms of questions. Lovely. Okay. So question number 1, when asking for sponsorship, what can we offer businesses to get something in return? Okay, so the best way to think about this is to think about what you have to offer. So think about all of the different resources and assets that you have at your disposal that you can package up that will appeal to businesses in terms of their opportunity to connect with their target market. So one of the things that you might do, for example, is the opportunity to enable sponsors to speak directly to your target market as part of a package that you put together. So where you can do that, then you offer, it's a really strong opportunity because it gives the sponsor the ability to connect directly with their target market, but you are still the conduit. And talk about what they have and how that can be of benefit to those who are their target market, who is in effect their captive audience. So top tip in terms of what have you got to offer is to think about all of the assets that you have as part of your organisation. So you've got your Facebook page, you've got your website, you've got any events that you hold. I'll pop a list in the notes. And then think about how would you package those up in order to offer something that is of benefit and value for your sponsor. But what sponsors are looking for is the opportunity to connect. So it's past putting a logo on something, it's that opportunity to connect directly with their target market. So second question, fantastic information. Are you running any workshops in the Wellington region? So we'll let you know. I'll put a link to our website, which the schedule for workshops for 2023 will be coming up very soon. And we often run workshops online as well. So keep a check in with our website. You can also sign up for a newsletter where we'll let you know when workshops are running as well. I'm very interested in what kind of contracts organisations are getting and with whom. Okay. So let me think about how we put that into the forum to get back from people. So one way that you can know what contracts exist is through the contracts database, gets.govt.nz. So that is the place where government departments list all of the contracts that are up for tender. So that's one way you can find contracts where where government departments are looking for someone to provide services with the skills that you have. So that's one way. And last question in the last 2 minutes, aren't sustainable funding options reliant on, whoa, crikey dickens, this is a question bigger than the 2 minutes that we have remaining. My initial response to that question is no, because if you're thinking about the community in which you operate, actually there's two things. One is, what community are you operating within? And where are the opportunities within that community? And the second piece, sustainable funding options are very much reliant on you as an organisation and what capacity and what skills that you have as an organisation. So there could be things that happen at a political level that maybe change where funds available to distribute. But I think you can also turn that on its head, like with sponsorship, for example, where now you have an opportunity where you can connect a sponsor directly with their target market. So that's an opportunity that they don't have through other avenues of marketing spend. So, and that's not necessarily related to what political party is in power. Right, that was a biggie to finish on. So thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today. Thank you to Arts Access Aotearoa for creating this fantastic conference. Pile your questions into the Q&A tab and we'll do our best to share some thoughts around each. Thank you.